the initial parts of it for now. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here at the AHDB Cereal and Oilseeds Strategy Town Hall discussion. And today, over this next hour or so, we're going to have a talk through the AHDB Strategy and Change Programme, and then have a deep look into what that means for the cereals and oilseed sector. We're going to run through a short presentation and then give lots of time for questions and to be able to answer any queries, concerns or clarifications that anybody wants. So just to start off, I'm going to just introduce everybody who you've got today. So I'm Will Jackson, and I'm Chief Strategy Officer at AHDB. Alongside me on the panel today, we've got Paul Temple, who is the Chair of the Cereals and Oilseeds Sector Board at AHDB, and we've got Martin Grantley-Smith, who is the Sector Strategy Director for Cereals and Oilseeds, who many of you may already know already. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to start by running through the platform that we're on, how it works and how you can ask questions. We're then going to dive into, as I say, a quick presentation. It's not very long. We're looking at sort of 15 minutes or so for a presentation, because we want to give ample opportunity to be able to answer any questions that you have. So just starting off, this is the housekeeping slide, and 2 or 3 things that people just need to be aware of. The first thing is that this session has been recorded. The reason that we're recording it is so that anybody who's not had the opportunity to come along today can do so and listen to it back online. So it will be going on the website, and we'll be pushing it out over social media. That will be in a few days' time. So everything that is said and everything that is written on this live stream will be available as well on the recording when it goes out. Now, to use this program, there are 2 ways that you can get involved today. The first way to ask a question is by using the chat function that's on the right-hand side of your screen. So you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a box that says Start Typing. If you type something into there, it will appear in the chat box on the side, so we can all see it. And if you've got any questions, you pop them in there. Then as we get through the question and answer session, I will read them out and direct them to the panel so that we can get the answer to those questions. Please put questions in there as we go along, because then it will give us something to really get stuck into once you finish the presentation. The other way that you can ask questions today is then you can come up on the screen along with Paul, Martin and myself and ask the question directly. And if you want to do that, if you look where the presentation is on your screen at the moment, in the top right hand corner, there's a little button up there that says Share Audio and Visual. If you click on that, a little notification appears on my screen, and then I can add you up onto the screen, and you can ask your question or any clarifications that you might want from what we've been talking about today. So they're the 2 ways that you can ask questions. I'll refresh that when we get through to the question and answer session. One of the reasons we're using this platform called Hopping today is that everything that is said, everything that is written down is publicly available for everybody to see today, as it would be in a town hall meeting. So with that bared in mind, there won't be any opportunity for direct messages to any of the speakers, and we won't be responding to those, because we want to be completely open with what we're talking about in the forum today. So everything that is said will be out there for people to see. And the only other thing just to bear in mind is that there is an ever so slight delay between the slides changing and sometimes the presenter speaking. So just bear with us if there is an ever so slight gap in what we're saying as we go through. So that's the housekeeping side of things. I guess that the one other thing just to mention at this point in time, and I'm going to talk about it a bit at the end as well, is about feedback. What we're presenting to you today is our draft strategy. So it's not a finished piece by any stretch of the imagination. What it is at the moment is our first draft of this strategy. We want feedback on it. So we want everybody across the industry, and we're talking about to all 6 sectors that we operate in this at the moment, to get as much feedback as we possibly can. And I want to try and make really clear that this is a genuine consultation. So it's not the sort of consultation where feedback comes in and then disappears into a black hole, never to be seen again. Every bit of feedback that we get, we will consider and will go into the pot for discussions, and we will make adjustments to the strategy based on the feedback that we get back as throughout this whole process. So there are several ways to do that, and as we get to the end, I'll explain how everybody can feedback, but we're just encouraging as many people to actually submit feedback as we possibly can do. So that's all my opening gambit for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move quickly onto the presentation now, and we're going to just talk through a couple of areas. I'm going to start by giving the the overall AHDB picture and where we are from a change of strategy point of view. And then I'm going to bring Martin in, who's going to give it the cereals and oilseeds flavour and what it actually means for the cereals and oilseeds sector. So to start us off, I'm going to concentrate on 2 or 3 key areas of the strategy. Now you'll see that this is split into 2 halves. This slide, we've got the change at a glance, and we've got the strategy at a glance. So there are kind of 2 elements to this: there's the change and how we are going to operate as an organisation going forward, and then there's a bit about the strategic direction and what we're looking to achieve as an organisation. So I'm going to start with the change side of things for a start. So we've got 2 or 3 things that are highlighted on the screen at the moment. The first is around cost savings. Now this is something that we get asked an awful lot of questions about. Are you as lean and efficient and effective as you possibly can be with your costs? And it's something that that over time we've tried to make sure that we keep a good handle on. However, we've got an opportunity here with the new strategy to make sure that we are absolutely as good as we possibly can be in this area. So we have made a commitment in the strategy as part of this that we will make a reduction to our costs. So that's through our support functions and staffing as we move into this new strategy. The cost savings will probably come in phases. So we're looking at initially at that saving that I was just describing based around support and staff. And then as we go into building the operational side of the strategy, we will be really, really closely considering what work we undertake, what work we don't, and potentially if there's any work that we need to stop along the way. So cost is going to be a real focus on what we are doing as an organisation. That kind of brings us on now to the modern levy collection. And what we're trying to do is make sure that, I mean, we collect levy across 6 different sectors, and it's all done in slightly different ways depending on what sector you're in. So one thing that we do realise through this strategy, and I'm talking about the overall strategy at the moment, is we have 6 sectors, 6 quite distinct sectors that have their own needs and have their own ways of doing things. So it's really important at this stage to say that the work that we do will be led by the sectors. So the cereals and oilseeds will be leading on what decisions are made in the cereals and oilseed sector and what is done with the cereals and oilseeds levy income. Now, when we're coming to put that levy income together, we're looking at slightly changing the approach to the way that we work. And if you've looked at the strategy document, which is online, and you can go onto the website and click through, and that'll give you any detail about some of the things we're talking about today, is that you'll see in there that we've mentioned what's called zero-based planning. But essentially, what we're looking to do is interact and engage very, very closely with the sectors, be led by actually what the sectors want to achieve and what the sectors need us to do as AHDB, and then setting the levy based on the work that we need to undertake to achieve that. So it's a subtly different way to the way that we're operating at the moment, but the levy rate being set based on what the outcomes we need to achieve as an organisation are. And I think that I probably should at this point just mention transparency as well, and I'm going to talk about it an awful lot as we go through. But being able to link in and engage effectively with levy payers is absolutely vital to what we are trying to achieve as AHDB, and we know that we need to be to improve where we are in terms of engaging with levy payers. And I think it's important to point out that engagement's a 2-way street. There's a very big difference between engagement and communication. So we are really looking to engage clearly with the sector, and we've got processes that are in place already to do that, but we want to make sure that we're engaging with as much of the various sectors as we possibly can do. And transparency comes into that, and when we're talking about the cost base and everything else, you will see a lot of information coming out about exactly how we do operate as an organisation. The last couple of things just to mention on the change side of things are 5-year ballots. You may be aware at the moment that we've got a ballot taking place in the horticulture and the potatoes sectors over the next couple of months. But away from that, as an organisation, we have committed that every 5 years we will be holding a ballot on overall AHDB. So where we are at the moment with that is that we're having conversations with DEFRA and the rest of the devolved nations about how that should operate, about the practicalities of running a ballot. And as we get to a place where we understand how that will work and when it will happen, we'll come back and explain a little bit more to you. But just so everybody understands, there is a commitment that a ballot will take place on a rolling 5-year basis. And as soon as we understand exactly what that looks like, we will come back with further information. And I guess the last thing just to quickly talk about on the change element of things is our governance structure. We've been working very hard over the last 6 months to address where we are with the governance with the governance of the organisation. There has been a group set up within AHDB, but also taking advice from an independent expert body on governance within organisations to pull together some proposal about how governance will work in future AHDB. There's some information coming out about that at the moment, and over this next few days there will be a little bit of information available on the AHDB website about that. But as more becomes clear about the governance and exactly how that's going to operate, we'll come back and talk to you further about that. So I'm just very quickly just going to drop onto the strategy side of things now. So what we have done is we have broken the areas of work that we're looking to operate in AHDB into 3 main areas. We have farm performance, we have marketing and exports, and we have evidence and data. So those are the 3 areas of work that we're going to really focus on across this next period. So, and we will come on in a few minutes to talk about where we are now with our functions versus where we will be. But I think the key thing is that, again, that this will be very much led on a sector-by-sector basis. So there are some sectors that rely very, very heavily on something like, say, exports, and you might look at the red meat sector there. However, I do realise that from a cereals and oilseeds point of view, that's a completely different complexion. So the work that we undertake in each of the areas that I've talked about will be led by the work that needs to be done on that sector. So just very quickly touch on these areas, we've got farm performance, which we'll be looking at making sure that we deliver what is going to make the biggest difference at farm gate and on farm for levy payers. That will be done through various areas such as research and knowledge exchange. We're going to be concentrating, flying the flag for British product is about looking at our domestic and our overseas markets and how we can best leverage those in light of the changing circumstances we're in as an industry at the moment. And then the last area is about evidence and data. Now, this is a really, really crucial part, again, for the way that we operate. We already do a huge amount of work in the evidence side of things, and we would hope that we can demonstrate that we do a lot of the work we undertake at the moment is based on evidence. But what we're going to ensure is that everything that we do at AHDB, whether it be to do with the domestic market, whether it's to do with research or farm performance or any other area that we work in, that it is clearly based in evidence and using the data that sits alongside that to be able to formulate that evidence. So that use and pulling together of effective data and evidence is going to be at the heart of what we do. And it's not necessarily just what we do within AHDB, it's also what we can offer back to the industry. So where can we help the industry provide where they need evidence providing for different things, or where we can harness data in the best way possible. So that will sit absolutely at the centre of what we do at AHDB. So that is a bit of a flavour about the overall of AHDB. So I'm just going to hand over to Martin now, who'll talk a little bit about what that means from a cereals and oilseeds perspective.
Okay, thank you, Will, and good afternoon, everybody. I see from the list of attendees that I know a number of you, and it would be nice to say it's good to see you again. Only on this system I can't actually see you. However, before I go into too much detail, just one point to make about the 2 slides I've got is that we're limited on space. So I have used shorthand, and before anybody raises it with me, yes, I'm quite aware that some of the terms I use don't necessarily apply to all regions of the UK. We operate in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and I know some of the schemes are different and some of the policies are different, and for the sake of shorthand I've just used some of the terms that we are familiar with. So on this slide I'm just really indicating where the changes are taking place, and they're not massive changes in what we do, and they are really just putting a bit more focus in some areas. And on the second slide I'll seek to reassure you that everything else that we're doing we carry on with. So just on this slide, if we start with the focusing on integrated pest management, the IPM area. So this hopefully won't come as any surprise to you that it's necessary for us as an industry to continue to develop our IPM skills, aware of the fact that a lot of people, everybody in fact, is practicing it all the time. What we're focusing on within AHDB in the area of IPM is trying to draw information together into one place to help the decision making that goes on farm, adopting a prevent, detect and control approach as a route to dealing with some of these pests that we will have reduced access to with pesticides, and getting better data on incidents so that we understand where the problems are and the size of the problems in a more real-time way than we do at the moment. So all the work that we've been doing on IPM, particularly in areas of variety selection and so on, that all continues, but there's a little bit more focus on IPM in our research and knowledge exchange area. The second one, maintaining profit with the loss of BPS. Now, again, I know from a regional point of view, the speed of change differs, and what's replacing current systems also differs as well. But our focus is continuing on productivity, and particularly on input cost control, as well as helping you get the best return you can on grain and oilseeds marketing. And hopefully all this will help us deal with the loss of the subsidies that we've got at the moment over obviously a period of time. So that's the maintaining profit one. Benefiting from ELMS and maintaining net zero ambitions. Again, sorry about the shorthand here. I appreciate ELMS is an English setup, and net zero is also talked about much more in England, but I think you know what I mean. So yes, there are regional differences in both the speed of change and what's replacing them. But what we're trying to do is to help you maximize the return from whatever system replaces the ones we got at the moment. So as a business, your income streams from these new areas will be maximized. And in terms of the net zero, the carbon footprint, whatever you like to call it, not only will we be helping you measure it by trying to bring in some more standardized approaches, but also use the benefit of benchmarking yourselves against the best practices in the UK, so you see ways of reducing carbon footprints and so on where it's necessary to do it. And our belief is that in the next few years, certainly over the period of this strategy, there will be more demands on accounting for things like carbon. And then finally, I've got there access to skilled workforce. My Cereals and Oilseeds board believe that this is potentially one of the biggest hurdles you're going to face over the next 5 to 10 years, the availability of the right skills in the workforce. It's interesting, this week, I've spoken to 2 farmers who've just both lost their farm managers and are really struggling to find good replacements. So we need to get into a position where our industry attracts in and retains really good, skilled staff. And that's something that we in AHDB believe we can help with. So those are really the changes that we're talking about, and it's a bit of refocusing rather than anything else. If I now go on to the next slide, if you would, Will, this slide will hopefully reassure you that everything else that you're familiar with will continue. So those services that we provide are all in there, the recommended list, RB209, fungicide performance, all these things which you're very used to. We have absolutely no desire to change because they are so valued by yourselves and your advisors. So no changes to those. The surveys that we undertake to give us information and the industry information, whether it's the planting surveys, the variety surveys, the harvest surveys and so on, of course, we'll continue to do those. We're always looking at ways of doing them more effectively and more cheaply, but we'll continue to deliver the information from them because they are a fundamental part of the planning and running of the industry. And then there are the schemes that we have to demonstrate change, to communicate with yourselves, to monitor the impact of change and so on. Things like the monitor farms, the strategic farms, they will also all continue because we found them to be extremely successful in the last phase of our strategy, and there's absolutely no reason to not continue them. And then very finally, in the bottom left-hand corner, I've just put in the digital passport. So we have been asked again by the industry to review digitizing the current paper passport, and we're in the process of putting together a proposal for industry leaders and trade associations to consider whether to take that further or not. So that's all I was going to say, Will. Thanks very much.
I'll just get myself off mute. Right, so there were just the last couple of slides that we were just going to go through. We've been putting these up in each of the sector town halls that we've done so far, just to give people a bit of an idea about where we are. So this is where we are, where we've been for this financial year, and then actually how we've proposed about the splitting activity over the next few years. And if anybody wants anything breaking out from here, then please feel free to ask the question as we move into the question and answers. I guess that there's one part on here that I just want to hone in on, that's the support costs up in the top corner of this. So we can see support costs at 15% in cereals and oilseeds at the moment. Now, I think it's just to revert back to the point that I was making in the change element earlier on, is that as part of this, we are looking at shrinking that support cost down. So at 15% at the moment, that's where we're looking to start to make savings. And I talked a little bit about transparency earlier on. Well, if you look at the support there, actually that includes quite a few things. So that'll include a lot of the services that we use across AHDB. So whether that be to the use of human resources, whether it's the IT infrastructure that we use, but also there's some sector-specific ones as well, which are actually bound and used by Cereals Oilseeds. So, for example, Martin is part of that. So what we're going to look to do is try and break that out further as we get in. So you can see the breakdown as it is at the moment. But as we move on to the next steps, we're going to be very, very open with actually what those support costs are and how we're shrinking them. And as part of our commitment is that we're going to be as transparent as we possibly can with everything that we do. So that was that slide. And then I think you may have seen, as we get into if you've had a look online in the strategy document, that there's a little pie chart at the bottom of that's this one, that represents the areas of focus for the next 5 years. Now, I just want to kind of just explain the differential between the last slide and this slide. The last slide is based on budget this year. What we've got at the moment here is on the screen is something that is an aspiration in terms of focus and where we will look to work within the cereals and oilseed sector over the period of this strategy. We will be putting more detail to this, but it's kind of we're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation with this at the moment, where we want to make sure we have the finalised strategy and that we've taken all the feedback and we've made the adjustments that are appropriate. Then we'll start to build the detail and the operational planning behind it, and then we'll be able to give a bit more detail based on actual budgets and numbers as we go on. So I thought it was just worth putting those couple of slides up just to give you a little bit of context. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing the slides. One bit that I did just forget to mention at the beginning was that, as well as Martin, myself, in the background today, so watching along, is Nicholas Sapphire, who is the chair of AHDB as well. So he's on the call as well today, just listening in for information. So what I'm going to do now is, and I'm really pleased to see that there are a few questions coming through. So we've got, I'm just going to do a quick recap of how you can get involved. So we've got the questions where people have started to answer down the side of ask questions down the side of the screen. The other option is, if you do want to come on the screen and ask your question in person, you can click the little button that's up above the pictures of us at the moment that says share audio and video. And if you do that, then the little notification will pop up and I'll be able to bring you on the screen. So feel free to do that if you want to do so, and I'll come to you when we get a break in the questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to, and I will just say as well, we've had one or two questions that were pre-submitted before the session today, so I'll make sure that I get to those as well, and we're just going to spend the remainder of this trying to go through questions and hopefully answer all the queries that you have. So I'm going to start with Martin, and if I can come to you on this from Keith Norman to start with, who's asked, should the focus be on ICM rather than IPM? There are big issues in weeds and diseases that need focus and not just pests.
Yes, hi. Absolutely. I don't have an issue with that. We had a bit of a think at the early days of whether we called it IPM or ICM. And I know that there are different views on this, but everything we do in IPM collectively includes weeds and diseases as well as pests. So yeah, I'm fully on board with that one.
Excellent. That's a nice easy start, Martin. Nice succinct answer. That's great. So what I'll do now is I'll just drop into some of the pre-submitted questions that we have. So Will Oliver asked a question about the recommended list. Will Oliver asked, do you feel the recommended list is as beneficial as it once was?
talk through that if you like, Will.
Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, it's a really relevant question. I don't know if you're aware, we've been having a really big look-see that finished. Martin will tell you the exact time it finished about the recommended list. I went into that process with a really open mind because I'm aware of the issues with oilseed rape and the fact that many people complain there's too many varieties. As we work systematically through it, actually what we do and how we do it, I think is really impressive. And a lot of this will link in as to what we require from that list in the future, how we make it regionally relevant, how we make it relevant to IPM as well. So I do appreciate the usual issues about there's too many varieties or is the oilseed rate relevant, but we work with the seed companies and we have the various committees that sit beneath it. And I think it's really important that any thoughts you have are fed into us, but it has been robustly tested. And I have to say, I've had some really good feedback on how it works. And particularly this summer, there's two things that I want to point out. We have an app, which I found myself using in the middle of a recommended list trial site and found it really useful. I wasn't having cart paper around. But I would also point out that most people aren't aware of the sheer numbers of trials that goes into it. It's literally hundreds of thousands, and actually you can't literally scrunch it down into just a few number. So we are where we are in the terms of number of varieties, but actually it's the detail that goes behind it. Now, sometimes you might get this information from third parties, whether it's grain merchants or agronomy, but I think that depth of data is absolutely vital to what we do. And I really do want to pay testimony to the staff this last year under the COVID restrictions that managed to get all the trial site work done in time and a constant stream of information out to growers. Now, 2 years ago, I was getting a lot of complaints about the fact they weren't getting information back quick enough. I didn't have a single complaint this summer, and I think that's a fantastic result.
Have you got anything to add that, Martin, or we're all right?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Very good. So we've just got with. I mean, I think there's just a point back here on the IPM question we had before from Michael Hambley, who said IPM, ICM, or IFM. Lots of acronyms there. I'm just trying to make sure I've got them in the right order. As a cross-sector body and with many growers invested in other sectors, perhaps IFM, integrated farm management, might be more appropriate across the whole of AHDB.
Yes, I won't argue with that. He's absolutely right. As is Keith, it's shorthand for us, and we just chose to use IPM as the because it was more commonly used. But I don't disagree with any of that. Yes, of course, it's across the farm, it's across the crops as well. Yeah, we just got to agree on one of them. Yeah.
I mean, can I pick up? That kind of thinking, Mike, is actually really important in the way we pick up cross-sector pieces of work. So the Great Soils Project was one that 5 other sectors actually supported, and it is about that integrated approach, that integrated understanding. I think this has to be heart of our future thinking as to where we're going. And while I can see Mike's question there, I just see Sarah's made a question on the recommended list again, if I can pick it up. As somebody who's involved in direct drilling, I certainly share your desire for the information. Our technical problem is working within our budget. So there is a constant ask, and we certainly will bear that kind of thing in mind, and we might be able to extrapolate that information out of it, but to do separate trials requires an extension of the budget.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Paul. I was just going to bounce back up the questions now. We've had a couple in on the environment area. So Andrew Craig, I think it is, has said, in the area of net carbon, will you try and establish one common calculator for the industry in general, or perhaps one for each sector? And then there was another question that came in on environment further down, which is when it comes to benefiting from net zero, This is from James Cox. I would think it is important that EnviroBench is independent and isn't tied in with Red Tractor. So, and we've had another one at the bottom here, which is from Vicky O'Hara. Is there an interest within AHDB to promote regenerative agriculture as a way to achieve net zero? So we've got quite a few questions around the environment area there, and which doesn't surprise me because we're seeing that across the board. And I think I'll just come to you in a second, Martin. But I was just going to say, while I was talking earlier on about the fact that the work that we do will be very much led by the sector, there are opportunities we have where things will actually be multi-sector and will work across various different sectors. And you'll not be surprised to know that the question around environment is coming up in all sectors at the moment. And so it's absolutely vital that we make sure that we're linking that in so that we're getting the benefit across all the sectors that we work with. So what I'm trying to say is not everything needs to be completely independent of one sector alone. So Martin, can you just maybe just pick that for a start from a Cereals and Oilseeds point of view?
Yeah, okay, so let's work our way through it. So Andrew Cragg, hi Andrew, we haven't spoken to each other since yesterday. Just on the common carbon calculator, you're right. I think at last count we came up with 64 different calculators available in the UK, and they do take different approaches and give different numbers. So the purpose of EnviroBench is to give you a common approach. It's not a common calculator; it's a common approach, and it will allow you to put in information from different calculators as well. But the idea is to have something that is common across for the whole industry to use. So that's the answer to the first question. I think the second one was from James Cox, linking EnviroBench to Red Tractor. James, you've got more information than I have. I wasn't aware at this point in time that we were intending to. It's something I'll go back and find out about. But at the moment, I wasn't aware that we were intending to do that. And then the third question, which was from Vicky O'Hara about regenerative agriculture as a way to achieve net zero. Yes, very much in our minds, and we've spent a lot of time looking at regenerative agriculture. In fact, we have one of our board members takes the lead on that for us, and we certainly see that as part of the way to meet this lower carbon footprint situation. So yes, again, very supportive of that idea.
You know, I'll echo what Martin said on regenerative agriculture. Vicky, when I first took this position on nearly 6 years ago, I said my challenge was to make sense of sustainability. I think we've got some way down the path. What's really exciting now, in a sense of what we're looking at, and regenerative's right in the middle of it, is the function of biology in a way that we weren't doing 6 years ago, and I include myself in that. So it's certainly at the centre of our thinking.
Okay, we've had a couple of follow-up questions on it as well. So Andrew's come back with: is the intention to make EnviroBench in any way an authentication for higher purposes, such as I'm not sure, such as something payments? I'm not sure what that was. So if you just want to come back and clarify that, Andrew, that'd be quite helpful. And then John Charles Jones has come in with: establishing a robust carbon calculator for net zero purposes is crucial, but to mean a lot, it really needs to be able to withstand international scrutiny and comparison.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and that is our intention, to have a world-class system to use, and you know, we're putting a lot of time and effort into this because we really think it's something the industry will benefit from.
Okay. At that point, you know, it's a really relevant point, is the carbon calculator. We're fortunate enough to have sufficient global outreach to see what's happening in other countries. What we don't want to do is find ourselves carrying a really robust system out, other countries not, and then suddenly finding that their calculation gives them a more favourable footprint than what we're actually doing. So it's really important that we keep an eye on what's happening on a wider global sense.
Yeah, and Will, if I may, just to link in a question that Sarah Bell has asked about common language. Absolutely. I mean, Sarah's spot on. We really don't get into a situation where an individual grower has to keep putting data in to access a particular scheme. So we are taking we're building a system which if you're in one scheme, you can move into another straight away. So if you're already in Farm Bench, you will be able to operate in Enviro Bench without doing anything else at all. And that is our mantra for moving forwards, to have a common system and a common language for, as she says, inputs and outputs.
Excellent. Right. So Andrew has just clarified what he meant, and this is my problem. So it said it was meant to be a whisper in terms of payments. See, this is the problem that I have. I look for an acronym in everything these days, and I think I'm worried about getting it wrong. So I think Andrew's question was: is there intention to make EnviroBench in any way an authentication for future support payments? I think it's the angle that he was getting at.
It's certainly not our intention to do that. This is a scheme that will be available to and owned by the industry. There's no suggestion of it being used for any sort of regulatory purposes at all. No.
Okay, excellent, very good. Right, so I might just pull us away from that for just a second. So Hannah Foxhall here has asked a question about: will there be more support from minor oilseeds agronomy? So EMU applications are a struggle because EMUs need the same data as main crops for approvals, which isn't possible for minor crops in resources and time. This limits uptakes by farmers because of limited pesticide choice, despite AgFil wanting more crop diversity.
Do you want me to answer that one? So at the moment, we focus on our main crops, and a lot of the minor oilseed crops actually fall into our sister sector in horticulture. And that's where we have delivered one or two things. We did something very recently for linseed, and it was done through the horticulture scheme. So we have the ability to do it. It's not something we get a demand for in the main crops area very often, but we have the resource if we need to help support minor oilseed agronomy as well. So it is there if we need it.
Okay, excellent. So we've got one from James Goodley here. Is there an appetite for a no-till accreditation, much like the organic, to recognise crop produced in a way that benefits the environment, perhaps earning a premium?
Give a very simple answer to that. That I don't think it's our place to pick up accreditation schemes. I'm always careful not to create work that really we are unable to do. And it's much the same as there's a point fairly high at this from Paul Haynes.
Yeah.
Should we do farm assurance? And basically no, because we have enough avenues of work without picking up things that really aren't in our there's Red Tractor out there, there's a consultation out there, it's held across the industry. That's the route to follow that one through. It's not something I feel we should be doing.
And I think it's a really good point as well about the breadth of work that we do. And we've got to be careful with all these things that we're doing, what offers the most value from an AHDB point of view and what we can affect in the best way. And I think previously at AHDB, we've potentially spread ourselves a little bit too thin at times. So it's about making sure, and what we've got to be absolutely certain on, and it's an area I've been asked about quite a lot over the meetings that we've done so far, is we've got to concentrate around delivering value back to levy payers, and then we've got to be able to demonstrate that. So the evaluation of all the work that we do is going to be absolutely vital. It's going to be really important that we get that evaluation process right. And we've had a question in here as well that kind of revolves around that a little bit. And Keith Norman's asked, what are the plans for the ways that R&D work is going to be commissioned? And will there be an R&D committee for each sector with an industry representation that can debate the merits of the relevant applications? And I think this is where we've got to be very, very clear and transparent about what that process is, so what the process is for commissioning work, and maybe you can come and talk specifically about Cereals Oilseeds in a second. But as an overall organisation, we have to be very clear about that. We've said, and we are very committed to the fact that levy payers for the sectors that the work is relevant to will be involved in setting which work we want. So there will be levy payer engagement and representation within that. And part of the work that's going on behind the scenes at the moment will clarify exactly how that works. But in terms of commissioning work, in terms of then evaluating it, And then probably most importantly as well, feeding that back to levy payers so that you can understand exactly what it's delivering for you, about how well it's done that, and about whether we've achieved what we set out to do so is really, really important. And that's something that is going to transcend the whole of AHDB. So I don't know whether any of you wants to follow in on that.
Yeah, I'll follow on it. Yeah, Keith, I mean, it's a good question, Keith, because I think it's relevant to a lot of what we do. Again, on a static budget, we have to think in different ways, because we can't do it the way we maybe were doing 10 years ago. What we've done in the past, and Great Soils is an example of it, is how we can pool our resources across the sectors and do fewer but bigger projects working together. And in many ways, we've also got to nuance at what stage of R&D we get involved in. In the past, we've had the luxury of maybe being able to do some really far out research. I think as our budget has effectively shrunk, we've got to be smarter at thinking, how do we get benefit back to levy payers from the research that we actually undertake and fund? And the bigger projects and the strategic farms, to my mind, are at the forefront of our thinking in the way we do R&D work, but not just carry that work out, but actually get it back to levy payers so that they can sort of see it at first hand.
Okay, so just then to build on that, Paul, John Clark's asked a question here, just a bit on that, which is, are you content with the balance of funding between on-farm demos, so strategic farms, and ad hoc testing, in contrast to more considered and logical protocols of research and development? So are you happy with that balance of funding at the moment, where we sit between the strategic farm and the research and development areas?
That's a question I'll just have to think a little bit more about.
Okay, right. Well, shall we come back to that? We'll come back to that, shall we?
Well, what I can say is, if you look at our direction of travel, so we started with the monitor farms, which we've found have been fantastic, very simple, really engaging. It's been our best avenue to meet levy payers and levy payers to communicate with us, and geographically relevant. And actually, two of the biggest changes I've done on my farm have come out of monitor farms. So we then expanded that into the strategic farm, so we have a longer period of time to carry work out that's practically relevant. Out there in the distance, there's some quite exciting funding that surrounds things like what works. We're a bit off being able to sort of see how that can work in the future, but there genuinely is an ambition, I think, with government to work in partnership to do some more bold, exciting things on farm. Does that sort of answer it? Hopefully, will.
Well, hopefully, John, come back and tell us if you want any clarification on that. So, Martin, just coming back, Nigel Padbury's come back on the minor crops question you answered a few minutes ago. So he said, I refer to the question I submitted prior to the meeting, which I will read out in a second. What is the strategy for descriptive lists and minor crops? Couldn't that money be better spent to support minor crops in other ways? For example, agronomy markets, pest and disease management, placing wider rotations, etc.
Yes, I sympathise and understand where Nigel's coming from. We're not talking about very much money. There are other people working on some of these minor crops as well, and certainly at the moment our priorities is on doing everything we can for the main crops, and we don't. Well, it's certainly not the board's decision at the moment to spend very much resource on these other areas, particularly if other people are looking at them as well. I don't know, Paul Temple, whether you want to say anything about the minor crops issue.
Paul?
No, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Excellent, right, okay. So Michael has come back with spot on, Paul, with your answer. Now is not the time to divide and rule between systems. It's about integrated farm management and what is most appropriate in the conditions. That varies from farm to farm, soil to soil, and region to region. So that's so that was a positive to the response. So go on, Paul.
While my clicker's on, there's a question from Matt Cully. Will, I don't know if you can see that. Okay, yeah. Gaining the true value from net zero. Matt, that's been something that I've been thinking about for nearly 14 years now. How we get it, again, it could potentially be useful to us, but a lot of the carbon measuring and how we can stand behind it and the tradability has yet to be worked into a farming system. But I can assure you the AHDB is genuinely going to take this issue on board, because anything, and this is the key remit of what the organisation does. We are a development organisation. So what makes us different is the fact that we are not there to sell services commercially. We are there for the benefit of the industry to develop things, and this fits neatly into that remit.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. So just going back a little bit, we had a couple of questions about our approach and mills earlier on. So I'm just going to put those out. I'm not sure what the answers to these are, so it's either Martin or Paul, whoever wants to come on this. So James Clark had asked about emphasising the zero budget approach, also being driven by sectoral priorities. In addition to those sectoral priorities, many of the major issues are cross-sector, including other levies and non-levy sectors, which may be more dependent on the outcome of the ballots, which is all absolutely right. In addition to these sectoral needs, many are whole farm holistic. How will your zero budget approach help identify and build in these priorities, and how AHDB will pull in funding from other sectors? So I'll come on to the mills on after. So that's a little bit about how we're going to operate across the different sectors on priorities that spread across a lot. So from an overall point of view, we're looking. This is why the governance and the way the organisation is set up is going to be absolutely vital, because we have to be very clear where the areas that we can work on are and make sure that's been fed back. So we'll be looking to make sure that that we're taking in the thoughts from all the different sectors, and that they will be fed into they'll be fed in and taken as a holistic part, as you've pointed out earlier on. We can't afford to be in a situation where things have been siloed, and so we end up with cereals and oilseeds over here, potatoes over there, and then potentially some grassland and grazing over here. We all has to be joined up, and I always think that the environment's a good example of this at the moment, because a lot of it's working through the same land, and actually it's how we drive benefit for everybody as a whole, and in some areas the sum is more than its parts. So we've got to make sure that we keep all that joined together. So there will be a real focus on the areas where we can have impact across sectors. I mean, I don't know whether either of you have got something going on.
Yeah, no, I can. I mean, James, as a levy payer, I can assure you this is right at the heart of my my sort of I suppose concern in many ways, because this is a new approach. We are only at the beginning of thinking about how we might use this technique in the future. I think it's really important we approach it with an open mind, and I think actually what it's demonstrating by even mentioning it is the fact that we are looking for a more open approach than maybe there has been in the past. So we aren't just putting something as a fait accompli in front of our levy payers. We're actually saying this is an approach we're considering. We should certainly work through it from the sector and across the sectors, and in many ways we're reaching out for engagement with people. So if you have a particular view on this, it's important to take levy payers along with us.
Okay. So I am going to just return to that, and I've just had a notification to see if Brian Locke wants to come on and ask a question. Now, Brian, if you've done that by mistake, I'll offer you the chance in a second, and I'll try and call you up. If you've done it by mistake, you don't feel you need to come on, just knock it off your screen. But just before I do that, I'm just going to come to the question that I was referring to before on mails, which was from Emma Hamer, who has asked, can you look at claim, talking about the evidence being at the centre of what we do and helping industry, can you look at the claims we see at mills merchants when independently tested appear to be false? Can these be collated by AHDB so patterns can be exposed?
That is a tricky one for AHDB. We are not policemen in the supply chain at the end of the day. I would have thought, and Paul might have a view on this, I would have thought this was an issue for the contract. And if you have a contract that you believe isn't being adhered to or has been broken, then I would have thought you had claim through the normal contract procedures. Because I see also that Andrew Wilson has asked the same question. I would have thought it was a contract issue rather than anything that we can get involved in ourselves.
Absolutely. This is a commercial issue between the mill. That doesn't mean to say we aren't aware of it, and it's really important to point out we have a broad spectrum of makeup on the board. So we do have the feed, the malting, and the milling sector, as well as a trade sector recommended. So these these conversations are actually held within the board and the issues raised. We are aware of testing because to create UKP and UKS and establish the quality of the harvest, we actually fund thousands of tests to ensure that we know what each harvest is producing. But between specific individuals, that is a commercial relationship.
Okay, excellent. Just going. Sorry, go on, Martin. Do you want something else?
No, I just seen that Andrew Watts put in a comment where he said AHDB exists to address market failure, e.g. net zero, not contracts. So I would agree. I agree.
Absolutely, that's great. So I'm just going to drop back onto the last pre-submitted question that we had, which was from Craig Thompson. And he's asked, is there a drive to encourage more apprenticeships within agriculture as a whole? And if so, how do we do this?
Paul, that's your area.
It's something I really feel strongly about. It's a vital opportunity for the industry, especially now, and people are looking at future prospects. What I can tell you is the fact that the cereals and oilseeds sector has been one of the drivers and pump primers of the work that we've done in this area of skills. And it's not just attracting apprenticeships. We've been really guilty of leaving professional development behind and trying to encourage constant development through people's career and professional lives, both on the technical side and on the management side. So we took the sector. I'm trying to remember how many months ago it is now, Martin, but we had a proposal put in front of us that was driven by one of our board members, Mark Wood, who has a special interest in this, and himself and Tess Howe came together with a proposal, and the board looked at it and approved it, and we put some dedicated funding behind this. I think that's been warmly received by DEFRAs, especially as the industry actually looking for it after its own future.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. So, Martin, we've had a couple of questions here. Well, Andrew Watts has put it in a couple of times, and it's something you mentioned was about the e-grain passport on here. And so Andrew's made a comment at first, which it must be dependent on better feedback of intake tests, otherwise no benefit to growers. And then has come a bit further down. However, if we're discussing e-passport, the supply feedback on intake is a market failure. So there's a couple of points there around the feedback on it. Is there anything else you just want to say on that at the moment?
No, other than say, I mean, Andrew's always been incredibly helpful on the whole issue of the passport, but it's an industry decision at the end of the day, not an AHDB one. But I've always felt that it needs to add more value than just being a digital version of a piece of paper, and the feedback of information, the bit that's not currently available, I think is incredibly useful, both to individual farmers to look at what they're doing, whether they're supplying the right supply chains, but also for the supply chains themselves to make sure that they're not wasting time and money moving product around that isn't actually wanted in that particular place. So to me, one of the major justifications of doing this work on the passport is that feedback of information.
Okay.
And can I just point out again, it's a great opportunity when we've got so many levy payers and wider industry in front of us to just point out, again, this is classic area of the work we do in terms of pump priming development, and the board has stood behind putting this money in to develop this. It might not be as sexy and attract headlines, but we're doing it for the benefit of the future of the industry.
And I think Guy Wakem's probably come in with a point behind that as well, which is the e-passport feedback is the best information to help drive efficiency in his view, which I think would be right.
Can't disagree.
Okay, so just we've had Keith put another point in here about AHDB and DEFRA and government. AHDB has a strong lobbying capability. You know all too well that the issues that the industry are facing are putting in place with regular communication channels with government via DEFRA or BEIS to help support and shape a post-Brexit industry. So I'm guessing that you've maybe had this point before. So does either of you who wants to pick this up?
I'll pick that one. As Keith maybe knows, we are not a lobbying organisation. What we are, though, I think, is a neutral coordinating organisation. Because of the oversight that we have and the links that we have back to the levy payer base and the industries that they come from, I think we should play a role in this, in connection. Now, yeah, I mean, Keith, you'll probably be aware of some of my frustrations in the investment that Bayes has, it's fantastic investment that Bayes has put in, but there does seem to be some real gaps between those investments and the work we're carrying out. And I think, it's a real challenge, and I think AHDB can play a really good role in this, because rather than being a lobbying organization, we are a science-based coordinating organization, and can try and pull those links together. And it is uppermost in our mind, because it's such an important area of our work.
Can I just add to that to Brexit, there's been a fantastic group operating all the way up to Brexit, made up of trade associations and some of the key businesses. We're part of that, and we feed in information into that, and that group then does the lobbying itself directly to ministries. We've agreed to continue to support that, and as we go through the early months of Brexit, we will be monitoring as best we can the trade and any issues that are coming up, giving that back to that group, and that group can then take it to government, and that group carries far more weight than we do, because it represents all the businesses in the supply chain. So we are in there providing information, but we're not directly lobbying, but we're certainly helping the lobbyists do their job.
I'll add one added point to this. It is the frustration of the year that we've just had, because literally just before lockdown last February, we met on farm on one of the Julian girls that had been a monitor farm with Gideon Henderson, the new DEFRA chief scientist. Fantastic fresh and better. You'll have seen the really strong support he's given for gene editing and the positive role that he's going to play in that consultation. He's a key element in all of this, because he's got a great link back there. It's been a real shame that we haven't been able to build on the same initial links we had of getting them out onto our strategic and monitor farms. But that intention is there when we can get back to normal working.
Okay, brilliant. So Mark Coleman's quite an interesting question here about the splitting in operations as well at the moment, and has asked, market development and access accounts for only 3% of the Cereals and Oilseeds budget. Given the new trading world post-Brexit, is that enough? Over 25% of money is spent on support and comms and digital and creative. Have we got the allocation right?
Can I just clear up one point for start off? Market information that you get is part of data and evidence. Yeah. The market development, it's been that's a really good example to actually put in front of you. It's one of the areas that the board actually had to take a pretty difficult decision. We have played a bigger role in our budget in exports and market development, but we carried out a consultation across the oil industry and produced an export strategy document that effectively responded to what industry actually wanted. What they wanted to do was for us to focus if there were any blockages in terms of access into markets, but they didn't really feel they needed us to do direct marketing as such or attempt to open markets, bearing in mind we're dealing with commodities. So we are going to continue to do the important work behind UKP and UKS. We're going to continue to make contacts. And what we have actually said in terms of flexibility is this year we're on import parity. We haven't got an exportable surplus. However, if we did have an exportable surplus, the mere fact that we would have that exportable surplus would mean we would have a higher revenue coming in, and our intention would be to rapidly reflect any benefit us from market development.
Okay, super. So we're getting through most of the questions that we've had submitted. So, and we're coming up to just over about an hour now. So, if anybody has any further questions that they want answered, please just drop them in the chat now, and we'll try to get to them before we finish the session up. I guess that there was we'd had a question from I think Brian Mock, who had hit the move up button by mistake, was just asking about a point of contact, Martin. I'm not sure exactly which part it was for, but he started talking about knowing a farm manager who is on the market. Go on.
I've jotted that down. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Right, that's fine. So I'm just making sure that we.
Yeah, while we're waiting for some questions, Will. Again, I think what this actual session actually exemplifies the fact that the steep learning curve we've all been on this last year. You know, the chairman's really keen on us exploring every avenue we can to make contact and engage with levy payers. Over this last year, we've all had to learn different routes of actually communicating with people. We've learned what works and what doesn't. And it's really important after a session like this, if you have any thoughts and thinking on how we can commute better through this virtual measure. We know what works well physically, but if what you know systems that work for you, or you have any ideas as to what this has been sort of as an event for you and whether you've had some use out of it, please let us know, because we're always willing to learn.
Absolutely, and I think, and it's a really important point as well, Paul, because the world has moved on massively in the last 12 months, hasn't it, in terms of where we were this time last year, actually how we used technology to communicate previously. And what we've seen at AHDB is actually a huge uptake in when we've been doing virtual meetings, when we've been drawing people to online discussions. We've seen a real uplift in it. And one thing that we have seen is a lot of people who maybe wouldn't have been to our physical meetings before having the opportunity to link in through digital platforms. And that's been really, really good from my point of view. It's attracted a new audience to some of the work that we do. So I think that what's really, really important when we get out the other side of COVID, whenever that might be, and it does seem never ending at the moment, but there will be a time when we do revert back to some sort of normality, that actually we make sure we utilise the best of both worlds, because we still realise that there's an absolute need to talk to people, to be face to face with people, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a really good mix between the digital, like we're doing now, and not having and actually physical, either on farm or in person events. So we're going to be working really, really hard to make sure we maintain that balance in the right way. So just there are a few more questions that have just dropped in. So Andrew Craig's come back just a bit about recommended lists that should not be distracted by trying to test varieties in all farming systems. It's complicated enough just doing geography and treatment. Concentrate on all things being equal, and that's how this variety performs. So it's a statement rather than a question, really.
Okay, I agree with that. Will, can I pick up Alan Scobie's point and make a plea? So Alan is saying that we stop providing daily futures prices by email. There is an issue around here that I just want to use this to raise a point. When we had to go through an exercise with GRDP and being able to use your email addresses with your permission, we did a survey and asked people whether they were happy to be signed up for us to do that. And quite a few people didn't respond, and therefore we are obliged by law, unfortunately, to stop sending you information. So this is, if you found in the recent past that what information you were getting by email you don't get anymore, it's because you didn't respond, probably you didn't respond to our request to allow us to send the information. Please go on the website and sign yourself back in, because the information is all there and it hasn't changed. What has changed is our ability to be able to get it to you without your permission. So please do go back and get that. It's still there.
Absolutely, and it's caused problems right across the board, because essentially we had to revert, unless people said we could, we had to delete everything, so we didn't have information. You know, it's one of the challenges on a day like today, because we'd like to be able to circulate the list of people who are attending today, but we can't do, because again of the laws that sit around data at the moment, and using personal data. So yeah, please go and re-sign up, because there's still all this information in there.
Can I also pick up on Sarah Bell's point, because it's a brilliant one, and I see Mike Hamley has also responded to it as well. We sit in a position, unlike potatoes and horticulture, where we don't know who you are as levy payers unless you've had contact with us and we've got your details. And there are a lot of people out there who pick up information but don't necessarily have direct contact with us. So we are constantly looking at ways to find out who you are, so we can contact you about events and so on in your area. And what Sarah is saying is that we should get to a point where we do know who our levy payers are. There are ways of doing it, and we're working on this all the time. But one of the things that we could do in working on the e-grain passport is to actually have more information about who's out there selling grain. So I thoroughly agree with Sarah. It would be so much better for us as an organisation if we had a database of our levy payers, but we don't currently, and I personally believe it's a serious problem for us.
And on that, both Sarah and Mike, it is really important when we're looking at holding a ballot that we actually do know who our levy payers are. So I mean, we are just at the beginning of this, and so we haven't got any answers at the moment, but we do need to know how or who our levy payers are, and for ballot purposes, they will have to be verifiable as well.
Absolutely, and I mean this stretches across more than just cereals and oilseeds as well, doesn't it? We've got it in beef and lamb, dairy, and others as well, where we're in exactly the same position where we need to get that nailed down. So I'm just going to probably chuck this one back across to you, Martin, even though it was targeted at me, which is Will mentioned earlier the strategic priority will be given towards benefiting from ELMs and meeting net zero ambitions in the future. Is this envisaged in a proactive or reactive way, or both? So from a cereals and oilseeds point of view, where do you see that line?
Okay, so we want to go proactive on this. And I just reiterate again, very conscious that ELMS is an English scheme, but the equivalents we will work with in the other regions as well. So yes, we don't want to wait for people to sign up to schemes or for schemes to be developed that aren't necessarily ideal. We will, where we can, try and influence the design of these schemes for the benefit of the industry, looking at the commerciality of it and the environment and so on. But we've already started on this. We started to say to growers, look at your farm and your business and think where in these schemes you can maximize the return for your business. And you don't have to wait for the scheme to come out to do that. You can already start to plan that. And we've been doing that now through our business groups and our KE team for some time. So absolutely, we want to be on the front foot with this.
And can I also add to that? We do have a processing sector of levy payers that contribute to this particular sector. And one of the key drivers is also sort of in this area as well. So it's important we can take that not just from a production basis, but take that back to our processing base as well.
Yeah, perfect. So Paul, there's one that's just directed at you here, which is about gene editing earlier. So you mentioned earlier, and will AHDB be involved in the upcoming consultation? And will you be in place to help growers and guide them through what is likely to be a very controversial consultation?
Well, I don't think it's going to be quite as controversial as it maybe would have been 2 or 3 years ago. I think, to be perfectly honest, I actually haven't looked at the consultation myself. We will put this on our board agenda and then sort of take a steer from there as to what level of involvement we have. I think our role is certainly within an explanatory part of this. Our board has had the editing techniques put in front of them. I am fortunate enough to have had this explained several times, and I'm still on a learning process. So you're absolutely right. This is not something that can be easily picked up and understood. So we will, I think, Martin, look at as to how we can provide the understanding behind this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So Andrew's just made a comment about his market, about him specifically. So Martin, I'll let you pick that offline. I'll pick that up offline and check the settings. Okay.
Anybody who knows Andrew knows he's a bit of a special case, and he does seem to have managed to lock himself out of just about everything we produce. But we are working on it.
Okay, excellent. That's great. So what I want to do is, because I think we've been through pretty much all the questions that have been asked. We will check through afterwards and just make sure we haven't missed anything. I do try and scroll up and down and make sure there was nothing left over. Just before we finish off though, and if there are any last things, just please pop them in now. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the feedback element of where we are at the moment. So I will just quickly drop one more slide up on the screen, which should hopefully appear now. So as I alluded to at the beginning, This is very much still a draft strategy, and we're keen to have as much feedback as we possibly can do on the change and strategy program that we've put out. Now, there are two or three ways about feeding back on this, and David's just putting in the chat at the moment the links, so you can click directly on them if you want to go through and do it. But we have the online version, which is quite a short questionnaire online where you go in, identify which sector you're from, and it's quite intuitive, and you just click through, answer a few questions, and then there's a bit of a free text box at the end to put any further information that you want in. And there's also an email address, which is strategy2021@ahdb.org.uk, where you can send an email in and that will be picked up. What we really want is we want as many different parties to be responding to this as we possibly can do. So we want levy payers. We're also interested in views from right across the sector. So please, if you've been on here today and you've developed a bit of a view on the direction that we're taking, or there's anything else that you really want to focus on, then please respond and let us know. I guess the other thing just to mention at this point in time is that the consultation for this lasts until the end of the month. So it's the 29th of January that it closes. So in the meantime, or even after that, if you want to have any discussion further about any of these, if you've got a group that you're part of that you would like either me, Martin, or Paul to come and have a conversation with, please let us know, because we're really, really keen to get out and see as many people and discuss as many things as we possibly can do. So please get in touch if you want anything further from us at all. That's fine. I see we've just had one or two things just dropped into the chat now, just before we and we can just wrap up with one or two of these. So I think that's a comment from James Clark just around gene editing to a wider audience would be a really good topic for a workshop and work well online. So I don't know whether that's something that we're potentially looking at, Martin.
Yeah.
We've got John's going, there's a distinct trend in knowledge transfer aspects of AHDB staff reporting the report finding of commissioned research. This removes the first-hand aspects of the report being given to those who actually did the work. Is this a trend to continue? I
wasn't aware that it was, and it's certainly not, as far as I know, a part of our strategy. I'll follow that up, but yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
And then the last one, people from Rothamsted and NIAB gave very good insight recently on the AICC conference. Oh, sorry, IC, yeah, so I've got that now. And if of any interest to anybody, so that's just a bit in there for information, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered everything off that was in the chat. I guess unless there's anything else from Paul, from you or Martin at the moment, I think we've covered a fairly wide range of topics there. And I will just say again, if there's anything that you want to follow up on afterwards, we're more than happy to come back and have a look at anything. So I'll just close down now by saying thank you very much to Martin and Paul for your time this afternoon in answering all the questions. But more importantly, thank you very much to everybody who has taken the time out of their afternoon to log in and help us put this on. Some really, really good questions, and all this helps us build our understanding of where we are and helps us develop. So thank you very, very much for that, and have a good rest of your afternoon. Cheers now. Bye-bye.